Welcome to the Masterpiece Marriage Show, where couples share their stories about life as an interracial couple. I'm your host, Jamie Kaur, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking to Cliff and Martha. Cliff is a Caucasian man from Odessa, Texas, and Martha is a beautiful woman from San Antonio originally and moved up to Odessa. They just celebrated their 15-year anniversary together. Thank you for joining me today, DeArmond. Congratulations on 15 years.
Thank you so much. We're glad to be with you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you. Let's get straight into it. For those who don't know or haven't heard your story, can you tell us like a brief 2-minute version of how y'all met?
Sure
2 minutes. You go?
You go ahead.
Rock, paper, scissors?
No, you get it. You got it. You tell this story beautifully.
Okay. So we met at church. You want to start from there?
Yeah.
Okay. We met at church, and I had been going to Latter-Rain for quite some years, and then a little later on, Cliff and I met and started dating and talking. Well, I asked for his number, and that's his thing. He always tells everybody that I asked for his number first. But what had happened is he was the leader of our young adults group, and he was like, what do y'all want to do about, what do you want out of this group? And I was like, I want to get to know more people my age going through life the way that I'm going through it, trying to walk in this Christian faith. And so I did ask for his number because he said that a group of people hung out together and had lunch. And so he was like, yeah, just get my number. So I got it. Anyway, we started dating. And then within 6 months, we were engaged. And by the end of the year, we were married. Is that short? Is that too short?
That is correct. No, that is relatively accurate.
Relatively? Okay. What do you want to add?
I would only add that we met, and I think she was looking for platonic friendship, and I thought she was smoking hot, and so I took advantage of that. But I mean, the details are relatively accurate. Really, the point that matters from a guy's point of view is she asked for my number first,
and you win,
and he won. And I won too.
That's so cool. So you guys pretty quickly.
We did.
Yeah.
So I think when I was 18, he was 20. But by the time I was 18, I was already a mom of an almost 2-year-old. So not only are we, blended races, we're also a beautiful combination of a blended family that's really been one whole family.
Yeah.
So I think we were just
we were very mature for our age, both of us.
Yeah.
Even being 20 and 18, we were already to the point in life felt like we were professionals and had a career. So we knew what we wanted and knew what we didn't, and so it did go fast, and it was able to move fast.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like my husband and I, we got engaged at 5 months and then married at 8 months together. Yeah. So we went quick too.
Yeah. I guess when you know.
Absolutely. Well, I love it. That's such a good story. Okay, so can you explain a little behind the scenes of, so you're bringing in these two cultures. Can you share what it's been like bringing in the different cultures into marriage?
Yeah, I can definitely say that for me, I grew up in Texas, West Texas, and I grew up in a church that was predominantly Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And so understanding the culture really expedited my comfort with her, because I can tell you that I only dated one Caucasian girl, and all the rest of the girls that I dated were Hispanic, which was not a whole lot. I'm just going to throw that in there.
Thank you. Thanks for clarification.
Thank you, babe. But for me, it wasn't until we got married. Yeah, we understood some more. It wasn't understanding. It was learning to adjust to things that were important. Mm. And you didn't realize that the first few Christmases, because you knew Hispanic people celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. But it's when you begin to adjust and you want to be with this family, you know what I mean? And so there was concessions that had to be made. Would you agree?
I would say the same thing, but I don't know that it was a big integration thing for me necessarily going into his, traditions or things like that. I think
we already had, even my family being white, we already had a lot of Hispanic traditions because that's just the traditions we were raised around. And so celebrating Christmas on Christmas Eve versus Christmas morning, sure, that still happens to a certain degree, but it wasn't a weird thing. You know what I mean?
And is that because, I'm guessing because you were around it and that was the norm?
I would think so.
Yeah, we were raised, when I met her, I knew a lot of Spanish, you know what I mean? And I knew things, so it wasn't a huge culture shock. I will not say there wasn't adjustments, and we can get into that, but yeah.
Yeah. And I've mainly dated Caucasian men too. So it was it. And then my friends were all, growing up in a small town, Comfort, that was predominantly white. So that's all my friends really were. A lot of them were. So going into their homes, it was something that was familiar as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool that you were already very accustomed to it because you had seen it modeled, you'd seen it around. Yeah. Can you talk to me about the expectations of spousal roles within the different cultural backgrounds?
That definitely is a place that we saw some differences because my family was very male dominant, as far as decision making and financial decisions and things like that. And regardless of whether I agree with that now or not, that was the model I was exposed to and comfortable with. Whereas Martha, go ahead.
Yeah, me, I mean, even being in a Latino household, my mom was a single parent. And so she was the one making those decisions and doing all of that. And so whenever we came together, it was, well, I need to be a part of it too. It's not just, it's a team, it's you and I, or sometimes me being a little harder headed or him on that end as well.
Yeah, that was an area that we knew we had to adjust and concede in a lot of areas.
And it took a lot of communication, just clear communication on what we were expecting and being able to communicate on what our goals were, why we wanted to do what we were doing, just communicating.
Would you say that took some time to learn and practice, or were you able to kind of learn that pretty quickly and model it?
I remember early on when we first got married, I had my job, he had his job, and I remember it was kind of weird, but I needed to ask it. I was like, so if I need money, how do I tell you? Do I just take it? And he's like, no, we'll just talk about it. And I'm like, all right. So that's what we did. It was, I don't know, like it was a nonchalant conversation. Like it wasn't like we sat at the table with our checkbooks and put it all, like we knew that our accounts were going to come together. We knew that, like that, I think maybe that's just because of how we view marriage necessarily. But I remember just having that one conversation. Do you remember that?
Keep going.
Oh, but it was just
probably
like, it was just like, he was literally like getting ready and I was sitting on the bed getting dressed, like it was like, so if you need to spend extra money or if I need to spend money, how do we talk about that? And that was it.
Yeah. And I'll just add that worked for that stage that we were at. Mm-hmm. And as time and growing together, then there had to be that, even those decisions have evolved into much more. And it really wasn't until I would say 5 years ago,
maybe more,
5 to 6 years ago. Well, what I was going to say is where I learned to allow our relationship to grow and not be the same relationship when we got married in 2015.
For sure.
2005 rather.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we figured out then and what we know today is polar opposites.
They are.
But they were right at the right time.
Mm-hmm. I would say so too.
That's really good insight. I find myself, and we're only 3 years in, but I find myself, well, we did this when we were dating and it was like this. My husband is really good at reminding me, but we're both growing and that's what we want. So we want a different marriage. But that's really interesting that you say that, because I can sometimes live in that place. Oh, well, you were so romantic, or this is, yeah, but now we're so much deeper in relationship. I know so much more about him and him about me and our cultural norms even, and our ways of life. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It was definitely a growing process. Still is. I don't think what we've learned from people who've been married more years than we've been alive is that don't change.
It doesn't. People are constantly changing. And so
the only constant is change.
Yeah. And so kind of evolving and not staying in one way, like, is the key to happiness.
Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah. Can you share some of those challenges that you said you adjusted? It wasn't so much knowing about the different cultures, but some of those things that you adjusted and acclimated to, bringing in the two different cultures?
Yeah. Everything from holidays to how we handled crisis to how we viewed savings accounts, all of those things were polar opposites in how we had to adjust. So let's go to holidays, because that's a stereotypical topic of discussion, especially amongst any racial dynamic. Ours was simple when it came to Mother's Day, because Dia de los Madres is always on the same day, physical day of the month, where Mother's Day is always on a Sunday in the month. I believe it's the second Sunday. Oh my God. And a second or third Sunday, whatever. And so only every few years did those days clash. So we were fortunate to get to celebrate her mother on that day and my mother on that day. So we didn't have to make decisions like that. But then as our cultures grew, as our marriage grew and everything, we had to make decisions, and one had to concede and the other had to. And so let's just take Mother's Day. It all lands on the 10th, lands on a Sunday. Where do we go eat lunch after church? You know what I mean? Where do we go celebrate? Do we ask her mom to come to my mom's? Do we ask my mom to wait while my siblings celebrate her, while we go celebrate? You see what I'm saying? And there was a lot of adjustment that had to be made. Yeah. And I don't want to say that we kept score and we remembered, well, last year we did this, so this year we're going to do this. But we both had to say, okay, I'm going to go. So I'll use the example for Mother's Day again. Recently, a Mother's Day.
This past one?
Yeah. We made dinner, and I made steaks for my mother-in-law and for Martha. And we celebrated. And then late, my family wanted to celebrate after they hadn't really planned anything, wanted to celebrate. And I had to say, we're not going to be able to make it.
Yeah.
Even though that answer out of my mouth didn't come without, well, do you think we can? There were several years that we had to go through things like that. So it's Thanksgiving. It's we like to travel for Thanksgiving because I grew up traveling for Thanksgiving. And that's something that we've kind of adopted. So last Thanksgiving, we spent Thanksgiving in the mountains of New Mexico, and it was great and it was exciting. And we weren't around either one of our families for Thanksgiving, because after 15 years, what is family is us.
Right.
And that's where we spent some time there, spent some time here, and found out over time, this is what we want.
Right.
Not necessarily adjusting to my family and your family. So family cultures clashing,
new traditions becoming, so
family cultures clashing starts off hard, but eventually you develop your own culture,
your own tradition.
So if you have brown and white, you have a light tan culture, you know what I'm saying? And it's your own unique model.
Yeah.
And that's where adjustment comes in. That's where I had to say, I don't want to, because I want to go celebrate my mom. But my mom didn't mean more to me than her mom meant to her. And so I had to concede. And more times she had to concede as well, because me being raised in a male dominant home, I thought it was my way or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize until 6 years ago, that caused a lot of hard times in our marriage.
It did. And like Thanksgiving, you know, his family had the tradition of he had family that owned a ranch in Brady, and so that's what they would do. They'd go over there. But Thanksgiving for me, like my mom would make a turkey. It didn't always come out right, you know, so because it's an American tradition, it's not a Mexican one. And so we would celebrate it because living here in America, she's a citizen now, you know, we would celebrate it, but it was never a big O to do, while his family already had that kind of tradition. So we almost had to, I felt like it was a great fit, and we didn't have to adjust so much. Christmas Eve at my house. Well, growing up, Christmas Eve, we wouldn't open presents until midnight. But we never did Christmas morning, Santa, none of that. While his family only did Christmas morning and Santa. And so then we were trying to blend both of our traditions together. I loved how they did Christmas morning, but staying up until midnight to then start opening presents, to then get home to put the kids to bed, make the cookies, get the reindeer carrots ready, because my mom wants us there all day long, you know, and then opening presents, setting up Santa, and having our whole shebang in the morning was exhausting.
And it made Christmas not fun.
It definitely was not. So we adjusted. I feel like, and because it wasn't just me, my brother, my other siblings, whatever, we were kind of like, could we do this a little earlier? And so then we just started opening up gifts like at 7 or 8 o'clock right after dinner. And we would go hang out during the day. We would do that, and then we'd go home and get ready for bed and move on. So that's holidays.
Yeah.
Very good. And it sounds like, and again, this could go back to that you already were accustomed to maybe what each other's families did or cultures did. So you had that knowledge, and that helped set you up for, okay, it helped you have expectations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me and Jonathan, I know of those things. I know that, you know, Latinos do Christmas Eve. I think he has shared with me that his parents really tried to give them an Americanized life. They both came from their respective countries, and so they were learning, and they were trying to give their kids, you know, what all their friends had. And so with holidays, my husband actually changed. Like, he's like, let's do Christmas on Christmas Day. And so we're kind of in that dance right now too. We don't have kids yet, but what does it look like? Because I really, really want to bring in the Latino culture especially when our kids come. And so I'm interested what it'll look like for us, but that's cool how you have really found how it works for you guys.
Yeah.
And that generation, his parents' generation, wanted him to have American culture, and our generation wants our kids to have their organic, true, authentic culture respected as well. And so that's a whole shift in mindset, because like she said, they just did Thanksgiving because that's what you did here.
Yeah.
Where for my family, Thanksgiving was like the kickoff to the holiday season, and it was game day, and it was the beginning. And I still to this day, because of our memories, I love Thanksgiving most.
I love Thanksgiving more than I love Christmas.
And I've gotten to where, well, we won't talk about Christmas right now. But humbug a little bit sometimes.
If it's like we lose the reason for Jesus. The literal season.
I love Jesus a lot.
But trying to get gifts for everybody
is Santa and them mess this up big time.
It's stressful. It's expensive. You got to take out your 401k to make sure
we won't
happy.
Talk about those adjustments.
We really haven't done that. Our 401k is safe.
Saving all year for it. Yeah. My husband goes all out, and we grew up very, very kind of small. I mean, we did Christmas, but it was family time. I'm the same as you, Cliff. Thanksgiving is it for me. That kind of starts everything. And then going into Christmas, yeah, there's so much to it.
Yeah. See, our family was pretty modest, while his family is really elaborate.
Elaborate, extreme, gaudy, no joke. And it is a bit of a unsaid competition, and I don't like it. It's stressful. And if you're watching this, family, for some reason, sorry, but that's just something I think they know. It's oftentimes, I don't think it's their intention, and it's definitely, I don't think it's anyone's intention.
No, I think they're just,
I think we just think that I think we just misdirect the whole meaning of it. And that's why I love Thanksgiving, because what is the focus is the table. It's the familyness.
Thankfulness, gratefulness.
It really gives me the true feeling of spirit and holiday and family.
Yeah. That's great. I love it. So leading into that, you mentioned in-laws, and you mentioned these, your family's learning that it's this family unit now, you and your kids. How have in-laws adapted to that idea? How have they navigated that change?
You go first.
Well, my parents were very hands-on, and they meant very well. Okay. And so, but my parents have a system and a world, and I think it was, they want us to integrate into their world. And that's not what my goal was, especially maturing into marriage. And that's not something that was really even a reality. I was the first to kind of get married and start blending our family with other members of the family. And so that was a little bit of a challenge. And that's post-marriage. Pre-marriage, there was obviously challenges, but overall it turned out good. But like I said, I think there was some expectations maybe that weren't fulfilled. But my parents love Martha. I don't doubt that at all, and still do. They love our kids, but we have really broke the mold on us was important too.
Right.
I'm not taking away from what was important as my family, but we really wanted to navigate and start a whole new course that involved us. And that's what we did. And that was what, if there was tension and maybe failed expectations and stuff like that, it could have been involved on my end around that.
Now, in-laws, like my family, integrating with like Cliff, it started off pretty rough, not necessarily with my mom. One, my dad wasn't very present growing up, but Cliff went and talked to my dad. We were already engaged at that time, but he talked to him, and he was just, my dad, asked some, pretty random questions, and I'm like, where have you been? And why are you just now asking that, But my brother, I don't know if this is necessarily a Mexican thing or a Hispanic thing, but my brother was more of our head of household. And so when we would get in trouble, my mom would call my brother before she'd ever talk to my dad. And so the dynamics between my brother and Cliff, my husband, they were rough at the very beginning. They were tense a little bit, and to the point, like, my brother hadn't even met Cliff before we were getting married. And the day before, literally our rehearsal dinner, he's like, why do you want to marry him? Are you sure you want to get married? And I'm like, this is not what you ask the day before my wedding. Like, this is a conversation you could have had with me a long time ago, but now, like, I'm getting married,
Yeah.
So, like, all of those kinds of tensions were around. And then we're people of faith, and he wasn't. And so it almost was like an attack against our faith, like different things like that. So it was hard, because I respected my brother as, he kind of was our head of household. And I think the dynamics of, no, you don't control me, I'm married, we're one, like, you don't have, I'm grown, basically, was tough. but I feel like relationships between him and my brother have gotten better. Open discussions between me and my brother saying like, hey, you're kind of rude. I mean, you're really rude. And using other verbiage as well. But I think started that conversation, and then conversations between Cliff and my brother kind of fixed them. Yeah.
Have helped to bridge those gaps.
Definitely.
That's really interesting. So do your families hang out together as well, both sides? So for me, we've tried to do that a few times, and it works. My family loves his family loves my family. I think we're trying to figure out what we like to do together, because both families are so different, and what each family likes to do is so different. So can you shed some light on how you've brought those cultures together if your families do hang out?
The main times that we all hang out together, I think, would be like our birthdays. It's not really the holidays. Our holidays are pretty separated.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my mom will come over for like an Easter gathering, but my family didn't have a whole lot of traditions, maybe because my mom was a single parent, maybe because of those dynamics. I don't think it was necessarily because of our racial dynamics. But what do you think?
Yeah, our families don't, I would say 9 times out of 10, our families don't interact.
Yeah.
I don't think that they don't like each other. It's just
there's not like common besides us.
There's no common interest. There's no common, I would dare to say there's no common desire even.
They're friendly with each other.
Yes. And for a long time, my parents were her mother's pastor.
Yeah.
And so there was that, but it was more of a church member kind of dynamics. It was never, we're both parenting them.
Right.
Not in our recollection anyway, or in our exposure. But my family, again, they're pretty deep-setted in their ways of doing things, and they like the comforts of their kind of arena, and anything else is a little uncomfortable. And though I love my parents, I know that's a dynamic that my parents have, and I don't think that makes them wrong. I just think it makes them them.
Yeah.
And
I think they respect that. They each respect, like my family respects.
Yeah, my family doesn't expect her family to be at everything.
No.
And they would not turn them down if they wanted to come to something.
Right.
And same thing for her family, So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just being comfortable in your world. I think that's very, very normal. So last question for in-laws. You said, Cliff, that your parents have been there was a lot of involvement there. So in the role of starting your family, has there been involvement on either side? What does that look like? Has it been more of a blessing? Has it been more of a challenge with involvement of parenting or starting your own family unit?
Are they involved in our family, like in what way? Parenting choices or influence? What do you mean?
Yeah, parenting choices. Oh, you'll do this with your kids, right? Or different comments of name choices, or this is how we do things. This is what you're going to do, right? Has there been involvement in that way?
I'm with you.
Early on, I remember my mother-in-law had just kind of said, like, the role, it's going to sound really bad, but she kind of said, like, your role is to make sure that the kids are taken care of, the home is taken care of, and if Cliff helps, then that's a blessing. But it's not his job to do, almost. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact words, but that's how he took it. And I was like, what? But so that was kind of the dynamic that I kind of felt from her. And I tried that for a long time, and it was very exhausting, and I kind of went kind of crazy because trying to keep up everything looking perfect is hard. Yeah. And trying to make sure. So, for instance, kids go to my mom's house, they can be wearing all of their raggedy clothes. And it's okay. They can literally go in pajamas. It's no big deal. But when they go to my in-laws' house, they have their good clothes. You know what I mean? So they're gonna play and they're gonna get dirty at my house, my mom's house, while they're probably gonna go to restaurants and they need to look a little nicer than just hanging out in hangout clothes. Does that make sense? Did I say anything wrong?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it just is again, it's the dynamic of the different families. To just piggyback off what she said, neither one expected something other than what we just knew that we couldn't send the kids in pajamas to my parents' house because there was a likelihood they weren't going to stay home all day.
Right.
They were going to go to town, or they were going to go to a restaurant. You know, they live out in the country, and so going to town is like, we're going to do several things.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to go and do multiple things, and you should be multiple faceted, you know, for that. I would just add on my end, though, that for us both, there was a lot of unsaid influence.
I'd agree.
Unspoken influence that, as Martha said, she was in a single parent home. The majority of her, I guess, definitely her adolescent and older childhood years. There was not a strong male, you know, father figure. There was her brother who was making really all the mistakes she or others were making. But for some reason he was given like a leadership role, you know? And so, and then in my end, we had two parents, and it wasn't necessarily the best dynamic either, because it was very, dad gets home, sits down, and mom does everything. You know what I mean? And dad's been working. And so I learned this behavior because I thought to my own level of exposure that it was the right one. I never felt like I was unsafe I never felt like that. And I think they learned that behavior. And so those things influenced us without saying that it was influence. Now, I always have been very, if my parents were standing right here and right here, I would say this: I've been the black sheep. I just been the one that is kind of out of the mold.
Different.
I'm the different
of a sibling.
Of my siblings. I just am. And so their influence was almost a little bit threatening towards me at times. And I would do things to be polar opposite to make sure that I wasn't being, I wasn't fitting in the mold.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with their mold and nothing wrong with me. And the sooner we found those things out,
right,
things got easier to deal with.
Now, with disciplining our kids, that was different, where his family was high on discipline and mine was like, I didn't get spanked at all. And so whenever we would discipline the kids, my mom was very upset. Something to when my first was born, my mom got really upset at me for circumcising him because I didn't know that that's not something that she did. And so she didn't talk to me for like an entire week after that was done. I remember that. After the other kids, she had no problem. It just was what it was. But I remember with our first, she did not.
And I didn't see that coming.
There.
I didn't see that coming.
What?
When that whole conversation or when that decision, I didn't think anything of it. And so that's a...
Well, it just wasn't because I had already done it with my first kid. It wasn't a thing whenever I'm talking about with Caleb, my 15 or 17-year-old, whenever I did that with him, she was upset with me. And I don't remember if I don't remember. I think that was what I thought needed to happen. And it wasn't until after it had happened that my mom was upset with me. Like, why did you do that? Like, she wasn't aware that I was going to take place or something. So I think that's a Hispanic thing, though. I don't think that that's just my family's perception. I think that
probably
is
not in the notes that we're supposed to talk about.
Oh.
But I don't know.
Disciplining, she was like, not okay with. Yeah.
Our stance on discipline was definitely different. I grew up in a strongly strict home. They could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, however they wanted, and that was normal. To me, it was weird. I was weird to what was normal for them, and so yeah, that's a whole.
No, and I was talking about circumcising because we're talking about like different, traditions.
Is it not a Hispanic thing? And I hate to generalize, but is it not a Hispanic thing to circumcise?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it might be, but my mom was very upset about it.
Yeah.
And it's not like I had a whole lot of other people to talk to about it. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do
And
some more research on that.
yeah, I will definitely. And that's interesting that you say those two differences with disciplining as well, because my husband, and again, I hate to generalize, but my husband wasn't disciplined like I was, spankings and very much training. And this is, why the word doesn't want us to do this and that. Whereas he just was kind of more so a free bird.
Yeah, I was really bad though. I was really bad, and my mom thought that all she had to do with me was just to talk to me, and knowing that didn't fix anything. Whenever we started parenting our kids, I knew that there needed to be a balance of, yes, talking and not just, getting the belt out, but also there needed to be some kind of discipline.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay, so what's something you have learned since being married about it? What's something you've learned about each other's culture since being married that you have really loved and embraced?
I think that Martha's family brings a different dynamic of family that I like. Though we don't all necessarily agree, I love how they're very loyal and forgiving. Maybe loyal is a strong word, not in the sense that they don't, get mad at each other or whatever, but they're very family, and family is a big thing, and family lets the favorite sibling and the drunk uncle that everybody's tired of all sit at the same table, and can't get rid of them. They're family. Whereas in my family, maybe we chose a little more. And again, I don't want to seem like I'm knocking my family, but it's just how it was.
Yeah.
So that's mine. I think they like the family reunion days and stuff like that. It feels so fun. It feels so real.
Yeah, but when we had the family reunion for your family, it was kind of weird.
It was a little
kind of cliquish.
Yeah, it was cliquish.
The family, their own dynamic family, sat with each other. Whereas with my family, everybody was like, "What's going on?" But we hung out all the time when we were younger. I grew up with all of my cousins, and it wasn't until we got older that.
And that may not be a cultural thing. It might be the business and the side of my world that was very, we've got goals, we're accomplishing goals, and it may not mean we can make every family circumstance and family situation. But that's something I definitely like about her family. And
yeah, I like the fact that his family, the part of his family, is they are very goal driven. They're driven people. I feel like whenever they're all entrepreneurs, and then their way, just the way that I see him kind of have carried and provided for our family with the food truck and different ventures that we've done is, I think that's a part of his upbringing. How to work hard and not just have to go get an 8 to 5 job, but how to make your own money.
Yeah.
So.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Cliff. It might not be a generalized, this is what white people do, but I feel like the Caucasians in America are very much exclusive. This is something I talk about all the time that I love about the Hispanic culture is it's very inclusive. Everybody's invited. Everyone's welcome to the table. And I didn't grow up that way. Not to say that we didn't invite people to the table, but I don't think collectively Caucasian Americans are that way. That these are my people.
Like if we were at her family's house for a holiday and a drunk uncle shows up or someone that maybe has a list of problems, he got a seat at the table and he sat there and they loved him and they fed him, and he might have just ate and left, but he didn't feel less than family at that moment. And whereas my family, it would be like what I'm saying is her family would send they send invitations to those people, whereas mine just might not send the invitation. If they showed up and needed something, they could have everything they needed. Mm-hmm. But they might not get the invitation. And so I agree with you. And I love that about them because I'm an inclusive person. Like, I don't just have my four and no more. I want to be friends with everybody. I want everybody to come over. If I had the resources, I want everybody to be here.
Yeah, that's so good. Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious, Cliff, for you, and again, I love that you grew up around the Hispanic culture, you were acclimated to it. What has helped you learn about the Hispanic culture? And actually, maybe I should ask first, Martha, do you speak Spanish when you're with your family?
I do.
And so, Cliff, have you learned the language? What has helped you learn her culture to be acclimated to that?
Well,
He knew before we got together.
I grew up in West Texas. We are from the Mexican border. And so I learned, okay, let's start with just a few weeks ago. I did a wedding and she was supposed to translate.
That was awful.
I knew more of the words than she knew.
He's not lying.
And I had to correct her. Like, I say, in sickness and health, and she would say,
Si estás enfermo.
and I was like,
what
enfermo.
do I say?
And I like, she didn't know some of the words. So I'm not patting myself on the back as much as I'm saying,
pat.
for many years before her and I were ever even, privileged to have each other, I grew up around Hispanic friends and Hispanic homes, and I spent the night with Hispanic families, and they spoke Spanish. Right. And I'm a learner and I'm a listener, and I can't turn the listening device off. Like when I'm in a restaurant, my challenge is to listen to what everyone's saying and stay in and it's weird. That's just so how weird. I'm wired. And so I listened and I picked up on things. So meeting her, she was, obviously.
I learned Spanish before I learned English.
Yeah, English was her second language. And so their home was all Hispanic, all Spanish. The first time I walked in her home, her tios and all her uncles.
You can't say it. You're gonna make it.
I'm not gonna say the word, but they proceeded to cuss me in Spanish, and I'm like, oh, I knew those words when I was 7. I know that one.
I know what you're saying.
I wanted to be like, I know what you're saying, but I didn't. And then my mother-in-law, she had a term of endearment that. When it's really into English, it's not very endearing, but she meant in a nice way. She did, but
maybe. I don't know.
So Spanish is not a barrier for me. And
well, we'll talk about whenever I went to go take bridal pictures and you were with my grandma.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was gonna get at. Now there's dynamics in her family that we don't communicate because I'm not a fluent, confident speaker.
You can understand.
I'm a better understander and listener, and I can even respond respectfully and communicate well. And if I put my mind to it, I can communicate well.
And also, let me say, all of my family speaks English as well. They just have an accent now. But growing up, it was only Spanish speaking. But as I got older, my mom learned English.
They all learned English at the same time.
Yeah.
So we went to go take her bridal pictures in New Mexico where her grandmother lives. Mm-hmm. Her grandmother has no English, no desire to learn English. Don't talk to her in English. You know what I mean? It's just, that's who she is. She's respectful of people that don't, but she doesn't pretend to know English or act like she does. Yeah. So it's custom that I don't go see those pictures take place because I don't see her in her dress.
Right.
And so I'm staying with Abuelita and they go off for not just 20, 30 minutes, but they go off for hours. And so our communication was food.
All she did was feed him.
She fed me and I stayed quiet and there was no problems.
None.
And then,
then he got tired of eating.
I ate well, and then she showed me a bedroom, and she said, "Come on," and I understood that she was telling me I could lay down, and I laid down and went to sleep. And by the time I woke up, Martha was back, so it was fine. But it presented itself awkward at times. But now when I see Abuelita, I can greet her, and I greet her, and she greets me back, and we don't sit and catch up But that's not her
And
personality
maybe I'm
anyway.
more of a translator in between both of them of what she's saying. If there's words that he doesn't understand, or if she speaks it very quickly, because you were quick talkers.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, language barrier is not a problem. Even really my kids, having grown up around my mother-in-law who speaks English but still prefers Spanish because it's more native and more comfortable. They even are learning what I learned at that age because we're not a Spanish home.
Yeah.
But Spanish is a big part of their life and who they love. So they are learning it without knowing they're learning it.
Yeah. When they were growing up, I didn't teach them Spanish already. They learned English, just like everything else. And I think it was more because if they knew English, they could communicate with both sides of the family. But if they only learned Spanish, then they couldn't connect with his side of the family. Yeah. So, but now as they're older, they want to learn Spanish, and they're learning it from school and learning proper Spanish and asking me questions or asking questions, and they want to. It's a desire that they want to learn Spanish. So they do.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Works.
So then, thank you for sharing that about the language piece. Was there anything else? And I guess that this is very much over time. You had alluded to that over time there were some things that arose and you would work those things out. Did some of those things about Martha's culture and the way that her cultural norms that you needed to watch her live out and then become accustomed to? And for an example, just some different things that Jonathan's like, oh, we never did that, or I've never heard of that. Just different cultural norms that he has that has taken, the past 3 years for me to see them modeled, or as they're talking about in their home. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a cultural norm. I didn't know that that's what your family did. Are there any of those things that you learned over time?
That's the part where I think we were probably a lot more alike and understanding each other than different, because I knew holidays would be different.
You played Mexican games.
I played
dancing.
Games. I danced the Hispanic dances before I met her. I danced them at weddings, and she taught me the correct way. But yeah, and so I don't know if I'm white. Let me be honest with something. I don't know, and I can't prove. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, I think there hasn't been that for us.
Okay. That's really cool though. The more I'm talking to couples, the more I hear that they were already acclimated. And I think for me, being in Washington, we are diverse, but how I grew up, I had a lot of friends from different cultures, but I wasn't ingrained in it. I wasn't surrounded by, it wasn't like West Texas to where there's a lot of this other culture around me. We have people from all over. And so I think it's been very different for my experience to step into my in-laws' home.
Yeah, let me say, because I think there would be a difference in growing up in an area where people who were not from there were adjusting to people who were from there, to where I grew up at people who were from here. We kind of adjusted to them. I know this is America, but these are American citizens too. And so we didn't, I don't know, it wasn't a culture shock too much, That's why I said at the beginning, there wasn't a misunderstanding of cultures. There was a learning to adjust.
Yeah.
Because it was all cute and fun the first few years. Oh, well, I'm married to a Hispanic girl now, Mom. I'm going to have to go over there but after a while, it became personal. And then you did a few times where you balanced, and then you decided we're going to do our own thing because we're a family. Yeah. And what is really the beauty of the two races is what you create together. It's not me always respecting every single thing they did and her always respecting every single thing we did. It is us building. It's almost like us building a different race together. And we built our own cultures, and we love the Hispanic culture, and we love Spanish songs, and I love to hear Martha sing Selena songs, and it's one of the most coolest things I love to hear. It's beautiful. And that's normal. And for my children, that won't be abnormal.
No.
Until they marry someone of a different culture maybe, or a similar culture. You know, it's what we created together.
I think I agree.
I love it. That helps me realize I think I'm trying so hard to bring everything in and learn so much about his culture, and I need to make that natural and let it be organic versus let me learn everything and teach me, because he can get frustrated. He's not a teacher, so when I practice Spanish every day and I'm really trying to learn, and I have an older brother who it came naturally to him, and he speaks with my mother-in-law fluently and she loves it and she always brings it up and I'm like, I know, I'm trying. So I think I just have these expectations over myself that I'm trying to learn your culture and our kids will love it or embrace it. But you sharing that really makes me realize I need to let it be our thing.
Yeah. And I would just add, if you would approach your, I'm going to preach to you. I might have to take up an offering though. If you would approach your marriage maybe with wings instead of with your mind all the time, and just fly together instead of trying to figure out where we're going, it might bring a little more peace and comfort, because it was in that we found our ability to go. Because what made sense to her didn't make sense to me. And once we let those things be okay with, well, I'm going to fly on what direction you're going in because I love you, and you're going to fly in what direction. And that's mutual.
Yeah.
You know, that's mutual. It takes me conceding as well as leading. And it's a beautiful, healthy balance. And so in reference to what you said, I think the more we approached our marriage with flexibility instead of being determined to do it our way, things got easier.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
I think both of you talking about what his expectation is, I think trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law or the perfect son-in-law, you're never going to be it. No one's ever going to be perfect. But what is important to your mother-in-law and his family, or even him, what's important to him is being around his family, and then you being around them and being as fun, you know, enjoying them and getting to know them. With the language barrier, I'm sure that's kind of hard, but Google Translate everything, which you can, you know, it doesn't have to be so difficult that you can communicate without using words, you know, it could be.
I was going to say feelings are all the same language.
They really are.
They're not, there's no barrier there.
No.
If you're communicating, you want words, but to feel something when someone's cleaning the kitchen and for you to go help, that feeling,
right?
You don't have to be asked. You know, it's we all speak the same feelings. We may have different language, but we speak the same feelings. You know what I mean? You can feel feelings is what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's good.
That is very good. And they do speak English. They all speak English. His grandmother is the exact same. She doesn't know anything but hello. So they do speak English. They speak Spanish in the home more so, and like especially when the extended family is there. And so I think I have this expectation over myself where, they're speaking English because I'm there. I'm the only white person that's married into the family. So I think I have this this unhealthy expectation or assumption that, they're speaking English because of me. But Jonathan and his sister, they always have spoken English. That's, so.
That's the same thing they can all, my wife, sister, and brother, they can all speak Spanish, but they don't. And I don't think it's because they don't want to.
No.
Or they feel like they have to.
Yeah, like my aunt.
But like my brother or my brother-in-law, his daughter doesn't speak Spanish, and so communicating in English is helpful for his family. His wife is also Caucasian, and so my sister-in-law, her husband or her spouse was Black, and so there was a whole lot of interracial things going on, and so it evolved, and we all had to make adjustments, and it's been beautiful. That's been beautiful. That's life.
It is life. And that's exactly why this is called Masterpiece Marriage, because masterpiece is a work of art. That's what it means. And marriage is that in itself, but then add other cultures, and it's a gorgeous work of art.
Yes.
It is. Awesome. Okay, well, last question for you. What is the biggest piece of advice that you want to leave with other couples that are also in an interracial relationship?
My biggest thing is Two things I think is to, in a relationship, I think it's important for you to know their love language, and then learning to communicate how to love them, and then learning to communicate when you don't agree with something. Not talking isn't communicating. Communicating is when someone says something, you understand it, you're able to hear it and listen and see maybe you don't agree, but it is communication. I think learning to communicate, and that's hard. We haven't mastered it completely after being married 50 years, but we're better at saying what we are trying to say, because we're all a little passive aggressive when we're trying to get our point across. But just learning to communicate is the best thing you can do in a relationship, period. Then when racial things come up, you can talk about them. When different family dynamics come up, you can talk about them, and you can come to a conclusion, a solution.
Biggest piece of advice I would say is be confident and secure enough to know when the right time to ask for help is. Because everyone from my generation, and I'll say forward, everyone needed help. But I think it's getting better where our generation is saying we need some help.
Yeah.
And we haven't got this quite figured out, because really what has been tougher is uprooting resentment, unforgiveness, hurt feelings that we didn't have the help to get fixed, but we didn't have the stamina to keep addressing. And you're not going to convince a headstrong Cliff at times unless you know what I'm saying? I need to be secure enough and comfortable enough in who we know we have to be to know when we cannot. We're talking on the way here, we were talking about hiring a new staff member, and we said we need to go back to the understanding that we should hire our weaknesses, because it will help us be stronger. Hiring our strengths is almost counterproductive. What is the point of only being strong in one hand? You need to be balanced. And I said that to say, you have to do that in your marriage too. Blending cultures takes help.
Yeah.
Blending families, she mentioned at the beginning of this that we're a blended family in a way as well. Although my oldest son doesn't know a world without this family dynamic because he was so young. But we're fixing to embark as we speak into that new chapter, because he's senior in high school and he's asking questions that he already knows, and we did that a long time ago, but he hasn't had a desire until he's 17 years old and he wants to ask some questions. So we have to be confident and secure enough to know whatever happens from here, don't make me a bad dad. Don't make her a bad mom. Don't make the other party bad because of their past.
Right.
We need to be confident and secure enough to know when the right time to bring help is. And I'll just add, an early arrival is better than a late departure. And so bringing it in early will cause a lot less of a mess you have to pick up. And that's across the board in marriage. And if you don't have those resources, find the pastor, the counselor, probably a good healthy balance of both, just in our personal experience, because some pastors are spiritually strong and practically weak. And most of the counselors, ours is very blessed because she's very spiritually strong as well. But most of the counselors are practically strong and spiritually shortfalls. And you need that, because in a day and age of mental health and all those things, we don't want to pass on bad habits not knowing we did.
Right.
Wow, y'all, that is so good. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm encouraged, motivated, convicted, and I can't wait to rewatch this.
Right.
Well, thank you, Martha and Cliff.
Don't tag us, because our families might watch.
Okay.
No, he's
I'm kidding. I'm playing.
Which is like, all right, cool.
Okay.
Can I add a disclaimer? We love our families.
We do love our
we love
families.
everyone.
Yeah.
We're just being real and raw.
Which is good, and there's flaws in every family. And I think that's what so many people try to, package things perfectly. It's like we all have junk. And I think in my research of finding not just interracial marriage stuff, but the in-law piece and give me tips on how to bridge those gaps and stuff. There's not a lot out there. So I appreciate your rawness and realness.
Yeah.
That was our goal.
Very good. Well, thank you, Martha and Cliff, so much for joining. I really hope that others glean as much as I have today.
Thank
You're welcome.
you.
Thanks,
for
Jamie,
having
for having us.